So this is Tim Cain managing game expectations. We talk about it a lot when it comes to things like Cyberpunk 2077. I think there were different expectations of the player there. I've worked on a game that I think the marketing was handled quite poorly. And because of that, the expectations of the audience that it was marketed to were different from what the game was. And that caused a lot of initial strife with the game's release. So, this is something that I think we need to get better at, and we need to learn from somebody who has worked on a lot of games. So, Tim Cain managing game expectations. Have you seen this video? Let me quickly see. I recreated a 400-year-old alchemy potion for depression and then try. We'll add that to the list. Tim Cain managing game expectations. Everybody say hi, Tim. Hi, Tim.
Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about managing game expectations.
Yeah.
And let me explain what I mean by that. I've already done a video on discoverability, which is about the difficulty of people finding your game even exists.
Oh God, we need to watch that one, because that one's a whole thing too, and I think that's really crucial for indie developers, especially because a lot of indie developers think, oh, I'll just make a good game, it will become popular, I'll sell a lot of copies. That ain't how it works. That is not how it works. You need discoverability. I mean, you can't bank on your game going viral. Of course, you can hope for it because it's great. Your game getting 10,000 plus likes on Twitter or something for some funny clip. That's great. It can funnel people. I don't know what the conversion ratio between something like that is to Steam, but it probably depends a bit on genre and market, right? Maybe younger individuals are more likely to click on the Steam link or look up the game versus older individuals. So there's a lot of factors at play here, but discoverability is crucially important. It's one of the reasons why you might want to go with a publisher, is because they have that social media account, likely with already many people following it. For instance, let's take a look at Devolver, a very big one. Devolver Digital has 382.5 thousand followers. If they tweet about your game, guess what? It's going to get some nice visibility. We look at Raw Fury, for instance, which is a pretty nice publisher as well. They have 52,000 followers. If you look at Microraptor Games, we have 74 followers. Who do you think is going to help me get better visibility if I post something about my game? I'll tell you what, it isn't our own account. So, getting a publisher is great for visibility, for discoverability. And a lot of indie devs think that they can do it alone. And honestly, in most cases, they can't. You need some help, especially with marketing your game and getting it in front of people's eyes. If your audience doesn't know that your game exists, they will not buy your game. And it's the same thing with Kickstarter. Like yesterday, we talked about it. If people don't know your Kickstarter exists, they will not go to your Kickstarter, of course. They don't know that it's a game. So you need people ready to back a Kickstarter before you go to Kickstarter. And similarly, when you have a game on Steam, you put it up for wish lists. Well, you need to funnel people into that. And if you don't have any place that people can be funneled from, you're starting off on a very weak foot, right? I have 363 followers, 363 amazing, sexy people. And all of you people that aren't following, I love you too, because you might be potential purchasers of my game. I can funnel at people here from the stream into our Steam page when we have it, and therefore I can get a bit of a head start compared to some other people. And if we were to do like Steam Next Fest, we can get that first leg up. If you won't purchase the game, you can fuck off. No, I'm not the creator of Fez, okay, or EA with Battlefield 6 or something. I don't know. Whatever. Insert controversy here.
And all the videos I mentioned, I'll put links in below. This is kind of the opposite of that. I'm talking about once someone finds your game, how do you let them know what kind of game it is they're getting? And just so you know, this isn't the expectations that your team would have. So I already talked about maintaining a good vision for your game,
also
in
crucial.
My videos on how to be a good game director and how to write good design pillars. I'm not talking about that. I'm specifically talking about once someone learns about your game, So you've managed to make a game, and your team is on board, and it's about to come out, and they've discovered your game.
Yeah, like,
how do you manage their expectations of what kind of game they're going to get?
Yeah, like if you go on Steam, for instance, I will quickly find a game here. I think I have not safe for work games turned on. Yes, so let me find a popular upcoming game here that I don't really know much about. Okay, here's one. This one's called Deviator. Okay, this is my first time ever seeing this game. When we look at a new page like this, as a player, I'm asking, what is this game? Give me a second, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry, I'm going to be asking, what is this game? What can I expect from its release? And what's going to be fun for me here? I like actions, I like Metroidvanias, 2D platformers, sure. So what is this game? Number one, I'm going to be looking at this. Metroidvania game centered around centered around Deflect, featuring exquisite 2D hand-drawn visuals, exploring unknown wilderness and mysterious cities, delving into enigmatic realms of consciousness and encountering peculiar creatures. So I can tell that it's a action platformer Metroidvania that is trying to bank on a different way of fighting and is incorporating it with this world that they really want to sell here as being unique and interesting, right? That's what they're trying to do. Try to find the truth behind this chaotic world. I don't know if it's a GPT description, but you know, it's not that ChatGPT can't write good things. Sometimes ChatGPT is better at writing marketing descriptions than people are. Okay, we need to analyze ChatGPT for its strengths, and sometimes its strengths are actually in writing, especially compared to like non-native speakers or writers. Then I will watch the trailer, right? I want to see what this game is about. Okay. I like a lot of the animations, you know, I like the visuals, they look pretty nice. I'm curious what this deflection thing is though. Like parrying is what they mean. Not deflection, but parrying. So if somebody had read that without watching the trailers, they might get a little bit of a wrong expectation that this game is actually about parrying, and deflection is kind of the wrong word to use here. A lot of bosses, a lot of fighting. Some more fighting focused than puzzles, for instance, right? Deviator, what the fuck does that mean? Names are important too. Confusing names can hurt discoverability and expectation. Imagine if I called my game Alchemy Simulator. Right? And Golden Chronicles is not an alchemy simulator. It has alchemy in the game, and it is simulated, but it is not an alchemy simulator game. So name matters a lot here. It's literally Hollow Knight. It is literally Hollow Knight. But let's just pretend for a second that Hollow Knight doesn't exist. Although we probably should expect it to exist, because that can lead to expectations. Spoon Chronicles. It's like, okay, so I see this game is about parry, it's about this. Now imagine if I buy the game, I load it up, and there are only a couple boss fights, and then way more platforming and puzzle sections. Well, now I'm going to feel like my expectations weren't what the reality was. I was sold a different game than what I thought the game would be. Right? And all this matters. All this matters. Master the art of parry. Okay, parry is written down here, except up here you wrote deflect. You know? So there's a little bit of confusing stuff in here. Goat Simulator. Goat Simulator works because it is a parody, right? So because of Goat, when people see Goat Simulator, first off, it is weird enough and crazy enough to click on it and to be interested in it. You're like, what the fuck? I simulate being a goat? Then you realize it's a parody of simulators. And I think that it markets itself very well, right? I mean, this is the first screenshot. Perform a 720 front or back flip. This tells you everything you need to know about this game not being a serious simulator. The head being broken into the wall, clipping into the wall, and this character being fucked up too. I mean, this tells you everything you need to know about the game. These 6 screenshots are perfect. Latest in high-tech GOAT simulation technology. Like, it doesn't take a million IQ to understand that this is trying to be humorous. And therefore, I think it's very well marketed. People don't have false expectations here. But if you take, for instance, Cyberpunk 2077, when they mentioned that before release, hey, this is going to be more of an RPG game than a shooter. And what did the game turn out to be? Mostly shooter, very little RPG. You know, they said it'd be more choice centered. There'd be a lot of choices and ways to solve different quests. There aren't. There aren't really. So that is, you know, that's an issue with expectations. So I felt like I was about to buy a Cyberpunk universe Deus Ex-like game, right? Where I have a lot of choice in the way that I get through encounters and solve some of the storylines, and I didn't really have a lot of that. And the story wasn't bad, it just wasn't what they said it would be. And then the rest of the game turned out to be really bland and mediocre open world experience. So I felt like I was, you know, sold a different product than I thought I would get. Cyberpunk was a huge letdown. It was, yeah. I wasn't a fan of it. Random, but if I recall, you mentioned not being able to do a minion build in D4. Apparently now the minions scale with 100% of your stats. Maybe it's better now, but I don't know. I just don't like the game of Diablo 4. It's just not a fun ARPG. I don't like the open world design. I'm not really a fan of the gearing system, of the crafting. I think that Torchlight is a better casual ARPG for me. I should put us CP2077, I heard, was that you were going to have multiple characters depending on your decisions. The world around would change and circumstances for characters would change. There was a lot. Cyberpunk is a little bit better now, but it is still a very subpar open world experience. It is just lacking. The side quests, the side missions and side areas and side activities are just bland. The world is beautiful to look at, and it really has nothing in it. Fixed means a while back doesn't change how shit it is. Yeah. Compared to promises from trailers, it's a shadow, yeah. Compared to release, it's a lot better. Yes, compared to release, it's a lot better. It's way too on rails. If they had sold Cyberpunk as a linear story without the open world, honestly, 9 to 9.5 out of 10 for me. I think that the main story as it is really it's really good and really cinematic. But the open world aspect of Cyberpunk is nothing, and it isn't enjoyable. I want an open world game that is 100% side quest, serial linear quests. It's an ImSim, would have sold far less, sadly. As an immersive sim, yeah, it would have sold less. Even though that's pretty much what it is. But it's not even an immersive sim. You can't even sit at like the ramen shops and eat food. I mean, compare this to GTA, especially even on release GTA. And how much you could do in the single player as an immersive simulator. You could trade stocks in GTA 5. You could play tennis, you could play golf. So yeah, just, you know, yeah, whatever. Make more sense as immersive sim? Yeah, it would. If they had actually made an immersive simulated city, but they didn't. The city, from an immersion standpoint, is very bad. The NPCs are really bland. Exploring is bland. There's no real shops that you can just kind of roam around in. You know, even GTA, you could like hold up stores and rob them. Like there was a lot in GTA 5 that was exceptional from an immersive simulator standpoint and from an activity standpoint in the open world. They designed that open world for activities and for doing things outside of the main story. GTA 5 was completely different from what I expected it to be. GTA, you think the GTA games were to be all about like shooting and killing, but they actually have some pretty funny and enjoyable stories. And enjoyable side quests too. The characters are just wacky and wild and funny. I know the first mission in Cyberpunk with the spider purchase was the only mission with different outcomes and different scenarios, right? What I thought Cyberpunk would be, there was zero environmental hacking. Yeah, the hacking, I was like trying to make a hacking build, and it was kind of interesting until you realize that it's not only really easy, but it's kind of just boring. Like, I was expecting like Deus Ex levels of different ways to play and different ways to optimize and get through scenarios, or like a little bit of Hitman in there too. And no, it wasn't. One of the problems is, what was the you're dying component meanwhile you were doing side quest 24/7? Yeah. And that's one thing that I think Red Dead Redemption 2 did very well. With once you have Arthur learn that he has tuberculosis, it changes the way that those side quests are played, actually, in a lot of cases. There's still a little bit of he's still doing a lot of heavy lifting and stuff with tuberculosis, but they do manage it, I think, in a way that is acceptable from an immersion standpoint, but also acceptable without making the game fucking terrible because you're playing a character with tuberculosis, right? If there was only a mainline story for Cyberpunk, it would be better. Yeah, that's what I think too. Back to managing game expectations. Sorry, YouTube, we got a bit sidetracked. That never happens on this channel, right? Right, guys? That never happens, especially when we're doing Tim Cain reactions with an hour and a half long.
Sometimes there's such a disparity between what they think they're getting and what they get that they're upset about that. And then they take it out on their review of the game. You have a game that's a pretty decent game, but because they were expecting a different game, they'll get upset.
Yes, but I think...
And what you have to do is manage...
I think they have a right to. I think they absolutely have a right to, because you're advertising what the product can do. And even if the product is good, but doesn't do the function that you bought it for, of course you're going to be upset. You bought it to do the function. Even if it does another function that you like, you're still going to be like, well, I'm upset because I was told that it can handle this function and it can't. Fluid Flux is a good example. It can handle coastlines and ocean really well. It can't handle rivers and lakes super well. And it wasn't told to me that it couldn't do that in the limitations. So while it does these other things really, really well, and I can appreciate it for that, and I will utilize it in the future for those things, I was expecting it to handle these other things well, that it turns out it wasn't able to do very well. And therefore, I wrote a 2-star review. A pretty lengthy one, because I wasn't happy that the limitations listed in the documentation and the quality of the documentation was extremely poor. I also managed to make the progression of the sickness feel plausible, even if you do side quests. Yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2 is an 11 out of 10 game. I think it is the only game that I would qualify, or one of the few games I would qualify as a true quadruple A experience, but for a $60 price tag. It's an amazing game. It's beautiful in terms of design. Red Dead Redemption 2 without RDO. Oh, Red Dead Online. I played a lot of it. I enjoyed it too. I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed a lot of the jobs that they had in there. But man, Red Dead Redemption 1 was so fucking fun with Red Dead Online.
Manage their expectations. Let people know what you're getting. And let me tell you how that went on 2 of my games where I think I failed.
Okay.
Because like I said, I think you learn a lot more from failure than
you do
from success.
Yep.
So, Temple of Elemental Evil. The team there was trying to recreate one of the most famous modules in AD&D history. The Temple of Elemental Evil, written by Gary Gygax himself. Now, we were changing it from the original Advanced Dungeons & Dragons to D&D 3.0. We were doing our best, but let me tell you what we were up against, and there's videos on this. We had a low budget, a very, very short development time, of less than 2 years. In fact, the original time and budget was a year and a half, 18 months.
Jeez.
And we had a very small
Wow.
team. We had a dozen people, maybe a couple more. And the couple more were part-time people who
Oh
were
my
coming on to
God.
do something very specific that we just were running out of time to do. So in the middle of all that, we found out that WotC was changing to D&D to 3.5. Now, it turns out they knew it, and Atari knew it. We didn't know that. So all of a sudden, we were like, wait, we're going to put out a 3.0 game a few months after 3.5 comes out. So we wanted to switch.
Oh yeah. I mean, and already there's multiple problems I can already see. So you're making a game based off of an AD&D module and putting it on D&D 3. So already there's going to be people that expect it to operate in a similar way to AD&D because that's what they played it in, and it's not. And now D&D 3.5 is coming out, which, by the way, D&D 3.5, one of the best releases of D&D if you ask me. And now your game's going to be 3.0, so all the new improvements with 3.5 are not going to be there. Oh man, what a rock and a hard place he was put in between there. And 1.5 to 2 years with 12 people? That's scary.
They said, okay, switch, but they weren't going to give us any extra time. Finally, I asked them for 3 months and negotiated something, and they got it down to 2 months. As I've mentioned before, in the middle of all this, I got a kidney stone. And that kidney stone didn't pass in the regular day or two, like most people's kidney stones. No, 4 months. 4 months of pain and being on really strong pain medication. That wrecked a lot of what I was trying
Holy
to do in
shit,
the game.
dude, that
So
sucks.
my stuff, and also my oversight of other people's stuff. And then on top of that, Leonard and Jason were busy on Vampire. So I didn't have their expertise. They're way better storytellers, way better narrative designers, good at doing that that crossover between programming and art, which we call technical art.
Technical artists, by the way, some of the best people you can have for a game. They're great. Love to see Timothy the goat on screen. Hey, I have an MMO. Almost said juxtaposition. No, he didn't. He didn't almost say juxtaposition gratification. People who don't know, there was a video I reacted to. I got very, very heated about. I was a little bit of a T-Rex on that one. And it was about juxtaposition gratification. I don't think it's up on our YouTube, but maybe I can find it in the old video and we can release it separately. It was the idea that it feels good to start off weak and to get stronger in a video game. And this creator of the video invented a term that he teaches in universities called juxtaposition gratification. And it's like, bro, you don't need to make up some convoluted bullshit term to describe the feeling of getting stronger from being weaker, and that feels good. You're now just overcomplicating a simple, understandable thing for people who aren't in your little design sphere. And that's actually bad design. It's bad design to use complicated terms to explain simple problems. Because your goal of design is to communicate effectively with with your team, with publishers, with investors, with players, all these people. And if you can't do that in a way that all of them can understand, then you're not good at your job. Simple as that. And if you create some bullshit term to describe some simple concept as it feels good to be weak and get stronger, then what are you doing? What do normal people call that concept? You don't even need a term. And I would argue you don't need a term to describe concepts. It's progression. It's like player progression. I guess that would be the closest thing. But you could also just say, hey, it feels good to be weak and get stronger. We all agree? Good. We all understand what that means? We all understand. Because even people who don't make games, they understand that it feels good to be weak and get stronger because it's a human concept of leveling up, right? That's what it is. You don't need a complex term to describe that. And I hated that he says he teaches that at university because he's setting up game designers to have this lingo that only they understand, and then they go into into the workforce, and they start using these bullshit concepts to describe something simple, or bullshit terms. Hey, Wormius. And now they either look like egotistical idiots, or they simply can't communicate well, and therefore they're not effective designers. Complex words, complex terms, they don't mean anything in game design. What matters the most is effective communication. And sometimes a term is better for that. And sometimes it's easier to say, hey, it feels good to be weak and get stronger. I think you're displaying team values.
Guys, you gotta think about this as a business venture.
Evan,
all right,
for
the
the
three
raid.
of us combining our ingredients, making like one gigantic, delicious green pie. Some
That's
little
very
kid's
loud.
sucking it
We need to
down.
fix
He's
that.
paying us for the pleasure.
Thank you for the raid, everybody. Welcome to
Bullshit.
47 people.
Bullshit.
Cellostrims, thank you for the,
Derivative.
for the follow. Kidney Stone raid.
That I absolutely love.
I don't think that juxtaposition is an appropriate word for that concept. No, it isn't. It doesn't, like, linguistically, juxtaposition gratification doesn't really make sense. And even if it did make sense, it just would be so, you'd have to spend so much time explaining it, and somebody would be like, oh yeah, it just feels good to get stronger and level up. Yeah. And you know what? You should have just used that term in the first place. So overcomplicating terms, it seems like something that would make you smarter, but it doesn't. And it doesn't make the people around you understand game design any better. And you want your team to understand game design, because the better your team understands game design, the better they can work on their jobs. They can say, oh, well, you know, I remember us talking about, you know, this mechanic and how you utilize numbers that are exposed to you. So I went back to this old mechanic and I exposed some more variables that you might want to tweak for balance, right? So everybody, you know, me understanding programming, understanding art, it makes me a better designer. And my team understanding design makes them better artists and programmers. It's corporate newspeak? Yeah, it really is. Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello, Raiders. Bet you guys are tired, right? Juxtaposition is like a homeless guy and a rich guy standing next to each other, and it has nothing to do with getting stronger. Yeah. it's just like juxtaposition is a good term and it's very useful. Same thing with like something like narrative dissonance, right? But I think narrative dissonance too, you have to explain a little bit, but I don't think there's a better term to describe it. A good example that I use.
I didn't have their help.
Hold on, Tim. Wait, I didn't mean to do that. A good example of narrative dissonance would be like Last of Us 2. Spoilers for people who don't know. At one point, you are playing a character called Abby, who killed the main character Joel, or one of the main characters Joel, previously in the game. Obviously, playing as her is a very controversial decision in terms of a game, because you're playing a character that you actively don't like and don't identify with in a lot of cases. And a lot of players didn't on release. And at one point in the game, as Abby, you are expected to fight the other main character that you like, Ellie. And if you die to her, the game ends. So you cannot progress past this point without fighting a character that a lot of players didn't want to fight. And that can rip people out of the immersion, because the game is now asking them to perform actions that they don't want to do. And if they don't do it, the only consequence is that the game cannot progress, right? It's not like a choice you don't want to make, like you have to save one person or another and you care about both of them, right? This is a choice that the game actively stops, and failure and reset at a checkpoint. And so there is a dissonance between what the player is expected to do and what the player wants to do. And from a artistic standpoint, I think it's really interesting. But from a game design standpoint, one could argue, and I do argue, that it's bad game design, because you're forcing the player to do something that they don't want to do simply because you couldn't turn this into a cutscene. The main reason I didn't even pick up this game, yeah, I had a lot of problems with Last of Us 2, and unfortunately, when I say I didn't like the game, people automatically, a lot of certain people will jump on, oh, it's because you're a transphobe or something. It's like, no, I'm a transphobe for other reasons, but not, no, I'm just kidding. But, you know, it's like, no, I have completely different problems with this. I didn't even mind that they killed Joel. If I was writing Last of Us 2, I would have killed Joel too. I just would have done it later in the story, right? I would have built it up a bit and not just done it for shock value. Verbosity can lead to confusion and hinder the adoption of an idea. 100%. It's a very good way to put it. Other people get gratification from the juxtaposition of the memory when they fought a crab. More the constant dopamine hit of ascending. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much thought that the player is, oh, remember how weak we were? I mean, I think with good design, you can go back and say, remember when this boss used to be hard? We have to fight him again. Remember when this level used to be difficult to get through? And that can feel gratifying. Now you're stronger, and it feels gratifying, right? But I just don't like the term. I don't think it makes sense, juxtaposition gratification. And you have to jump through so many mental and explanation hoops to even try to explain it that it just wastes so much time. You will lose players. That's quite simple. Yeah. I like when you plays a game that auto levels to your level. If you don't feel a difference between now and 3 hours ago in power, that there is no dopamine. That's a separate issue, right? Is the scaling world. It's one of the reasons I did not like Elder Scrolls Online. As much as I agreed with the reasons they chose to do it, Elder Scrolls Online to me felt really boring because I would finish one area and the progression would feel pretty good. And then I would go to another area and it feels the same. I'm fighting Daedra at like level 1, and because they're considered common mobs and all my damage is scaled, I don't really feel like this is accurate to the lore, that I'm fighting one of the hardest types of creatures in the game at level 1 and just beating it easily, and it doesn't drop any Daedric armor. So I get why they did it, you know, because for that they wanted players to be able to start anywhere, start with any region that you like, play with your friends, and at any time you guys will be scaled and do scaled damage. So you can play with your friends at any level and it will be okay. But it does have downsides, right? So it has its upsides, it has its downsides. It is a juxtaposition, doesn't make the term any less cumbersome. Yeah, I mean, it is a juxtaposition, but just like there's so many better ways to say it. It's like temporal instead of time. Yeah, it's like those work in good narratively, like the term juxtaposition, the word temporal, these all work great if you're like delivering a story. But game design is not a story necessarily. You are conveying an idea. And the best way to convey an idea is with the least amount of confusion and misinterpretation possible. And most of the time, the best way to do that is using simple words and simple sentences. Diablo 4, it felt shit. Yeah, I just don't like the skill. I much preferred like Witcher 3, where you have areas of the game that you want to actively avoid because they're over leveled, and then once maybe you reach like near end game, you can turn on the leveling to you, just so that you aren't constantly fighting enemies that are always weaker than you. People don't typically fight lower level enemies to feel gratified by how much stronger they are. They might do as a joke for a minute or two, then they move on. Yeah, they usually do it because they're forced to, right? It's like, oh, another pack of wolves came here. Well, I have to fight them because now they're attacking me. Dark Souls types games, you can backtrack to farm or explore. That's true. And I think that it works really well in like Elden Ring, right? Where you have that difficulty or that challenge, and players will go somewhere else, level up, get some better gear, come back, and that is gratifying, right? Because now the thing that was hard is easier. Or just like you have more skill. Only time I heard temporal being used in a sentence was something to do with temporal lobe. Point. If you're incentivized to backtrack, I could see a sense of gratification that a place you were afraid of before is now a cakewalk. Yeah. Revisiting your mom and walking grass, level 2 Pikachu attacks you. Albert Noah hunting ground, Vietnam flashback, yeah. Alright, let's continue with managing game expectations.
For that. So some of this explains what happened with Temple. It's not an excuse. I'm explaining what happened.
Yeah, those are two different things. I know I just pressed play and I'm pausing again, but explanations are not excuses. I have a lot of explanations for why some of the game design that I've done I think is really shit, and I clearly made mistakes that I wish I had not made. And they're not excuses for the game being bad. They're just explanations like, hey, I can see exactly where I fucked up. I should have thought this through. I should have prototyped this before implementing it, and now I know better.
Guess what? Players don't care about that.
No, they don't.
They bought the game, and they're like, whoa, this game had a really bad story. This game had really bad encounter design. This game is really buggy. That's all they care about. That's all they cared about. There's no real way
And they have a right to.
to manage their expectations out of those things.
Yep.
So that was bad because we tried to do too much with too little time and money, and that was our fault. People had very valid expectations of what they would get, and they didn't get it. Now let's look at what I consider to be the opposite of that, which is the Outer Worlds.
What game is he talking about? He was talking about Arcanum. No, Temple of Elemental Evil. The game based on the D&D module. Now he's talking about Outer Worlds.
We set out to make Fallout in space. And we even said that because we said, hey, this is from the creators of Fallout New Vegas, because that was what Obsidian made. Now, we had a way lower budget than most AAA games, and we said that in every interview we did.
I'm curious about that. What budget did they have for Outer Worlds? I've never looked at their budget. $60. Maybe it's on Wikipedia. Budget. They don't say specifically what the budget was.
It was the first game that Obsidian was ever making with Unreal. We brought that up. It's like, hey, we've spent a lot of time learning how this engine works.
Yeah, but I mean, and as a developer, I didn't know this. I didn't actually know. It makes sense that they didn't have familiarity with Unreal. That makes sense in hindsight because, of course, they didn't make a game in there. I didn't know about the budget being pretty low. And as a developer, I can be like, okay, I know exactly what's going to happen with this. It's not going to be the greatest game. It's more of a learning experience for them. And because of the low budget, they are going to have to cut back in scope quite a bit. But as a player, of course you don't care about that. You say this is like Fallout in space from the makers of Fallout New Vegas. I can't blame you for getting really hyped, because guess what? That does create a lot of hype. I was hyped for it. I still think the game is okay. I don't think it's that great, but I think it's pretty good.
So I had to hire a lot of new people,
7 out of 10,
to work on the game because the other projects were already well staffed. We had new narrative designers. We had new programmers being hired.
Yeah, it's always tough. New team.
Again, players don't care about this.
Nope.
All they cared about was what game they got. And in this case, I thought they got a pretty good game. We tried to manage all the expectations that people had. But for some reason, excuse me, players either didn't watch those interviews or didn't care about them, and their expectations were set. They thought they were getting Fallout New Vegas length,
I empathize.
And mechanics and everything, but in a slightly different setting.
Yeah, I mean, but that's part of the marketing too. I mean, that's just, of course you want to say that. Of course you want to say from the makers of Fallout New Vegas, it's like Fallout in space. That's the pitch, right? It's like here's what you expect. But then, yeah, I mean, it just sucks. They said they were transparent about the limitations that they had with working on this. But I can understand, players, like you said, they don't care. They don't care, and they don't have to care. They don't have to care. And I think one of the things that we try to do on this channel is teach players. I know we don't have a lot of just like regular gamers here on this channel, but if you are just like a regular gamer, maybe put your hand up and say that you aren't a game designer, or you're not a game developer and you don't know much about game development. You are a lot of our audience that I'm trying to reach and show, like, these are the challenges that you have to deal with. These are the decisions you have to make when you are put in tough positions. And yeah, I get it. From a game development perspective, when he says all this, I understand now why Outer Worlds is the way that it is. And I agree. I think that for all these limitations, for a new team working in Unreal for the first time, a new narrative team, a lower budget, I do think Outer Worlds was pretty damn good. It was a pretty damn good game for all those considerations. I worked with a team that had to move from Unity to Unreal for the first time, and it was a lot of growing pains, and there were a lot of early mistakes that impacted the rest of the game because they didn't know proper code architecture or usages of the function calls, and that really hurt us down the line. So I think Outer Worlds definitely not bad considering all these problems.
Now, the game we shipped was short.
Hey, Slayer.
It was shorter than people wanted, even though we repeatedly said it's about a 20-hour game. People were like, "I wish it was a 40-hour game."
I liked how short Outer Worlds was. I liked it. I think it was very bite-sized, and I appreciated the goal to create a smaller scope, more focused RPG game. I enjoy playing through hundreds of hours of RPG games, but I also just like something simple. Can I ask you something related to 2 games? Go for it. Go for it. I hope I can answer it. Got a perfect video that describes juxtaposition gratification.
I'm wasted.
Thank you, Whitehead, for the follow. So this is the video that describes juxtaposition gratification.
That's why we need to just log in and stay in the forest, killing boars. Boars? There's lots of computer-generated boars in Warcraft that die with just one blow. Dude, boars are only worth 2 experience points apiece. Do you know how many we would have to kill to get up 30 levels? Yes. 65,340,285.
That's a game. That's a systems designer right there. That's me. That's me balancing. Like seriously, when I balance, sometimes I will figure out exactly how many of cargo. Like for train life, for instance, I had a spreadsheet table for how many of specific train cargo a player would have to take to level up between levels, and I use that to determine the amount of time it's going to take to level up for the player performing average deliveries. And then I can use that to help balance out to make sure that obtaining higher levels doesn't necessarily feel much more difficult. You think that Tempest Rising will be a good competitor for Stormgate? That would require me to know about Tempest Rising and Stormgate. And honestly, I don't think I know very much about either of those. They are not my particular games that I enjoy playing, but let me look up Tempest Rising. Yeah, it was. I remember we saw the Kickstarter for Stormgate. Was it a shitty RTS? Really? Was it bad? I played it. It was bad. That's a shame. It got a lot of money on Kickstarter. I have a problem with this actually, and maybe this is just me. But one of the problems I have with this is that it's really hard to tell units apart. Is that just me? Maybe I don't play RTS games enough. But having good contrast on troops in the level is really crucial, so that you can see exactly you can kind of get a visual understanding of troop placement. Yeah, good contrast is important, and I think like this kind of has a little bit of an issue. It's not too bad, but it looks pretty. But I guess for an RTS, it's like, how does this play? The health bars help. It's not as bad as I feared. The screenshot is, I think, poor. It's focusing more on like fidelity and you know, the cinematics of it, and I think the live looks better. I think the interface here is pretty clean. But I think for an RTS, maybe the balance and how well it plays against other people is probably going to be the most important aspect of this, right? Screenshot should have the UI on it. I agree. The screenshot is not how the game looks. Health bars above. Yeah, the health bars makes a huge difference. It's a Command and Conquer game for me. I don't really know what this is doing different compared to other RTS games. This says classic RTS base building. Okay, like, but what do you do? You know, why would I want to play you above other games? Yeah, it's an RTS, right? Even the features here, it doesn't like show me anything different. You know, when I'll take a good example, Endless Legend, right? Everybody has played 4X games. This came out at a time when when Civilization was very, very big, right? And it still is big, but it was much bigger then. Endless Legend is smart. It's a smart game. I think there are problems with the game, but it specifically said we're going to take the idea of controllable factions, and everyone is going to be so unique that it dramatically changes the game. You're not just playing Saudi Arabia and getting a bonus to oil production. No, you can play a faction that can pick up and move their cities. You can play a faction that does not require food, and so therefore winter means nothing to them. They survive off of currency. And I think that was a really cool way to say, hey, here's a medieval kind of style 4X game with RPG elements, and also when you play factions, they are dramatically different from other ones. You can play the necrophages, which turn the bodies of their enemies into units, and so therefore you're just playing like a horde. You just need to eat everything, just kill, 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 eat everything. But then they suck with like research and stuff. And for this game, for Tempest Rising, like, okay, it's an RTS game. What else is there? And it's like there's just nothing that screams to me, you need to play this. If you are a fan of RTS games, you need to play this, because this is what we do that is special and unique. There's nothing special and unique about this, at least from what I can tell from the screenshots and the videos. I don't know. That's my take on it as somebody who doesn't play a lot of RTS games.
But it was also very bug-free, especially by Obsidian standards. It was a very tight, well-made, well-crafted game.
Yeah, Outer Worlds was pretty bug-free.
And it sold really well, which is something that people still, who didn't like it, rally against, saying people were tricked or whatever. I don't know how people were tricked and continue to be tricked for 5 years, but there we go.
Poor Tim
But
losing his
the
voice.
bottom line is,
that's me after every stream, by the way.
Outer Worlds wasn't what some people expected, and they will say that.
Yes.
They will go online, they'll go on forums, or talk about, I wanted this, and they told me I'd get this, even though we didn't. And I got this, so I'm not happy. And that will happen with your game.
Yeah, it starts.
So the problem is, you're going to work really hard to solve discoverability. But then you're left on how to manage expectations. Once people discover your game, which is becoming harder and harder, how do you make sure that they know the game they're getting is the game?
And I'll say it again. For the people that are new here, they maybe from the raid, if you are an indie dev, just remember, you can't do everything on your own, and it's not a point of failure for yourself. It's just that making games is hard, and you might be able to make the game, but that doesn't mean that you can advertise the game. It doesn't mean that you can get that game in front of the people that you need to get in front of. It's okay to reach out to a publisher and utilize them for their audience, for their for the platforms that they have, like on Twitter or something, or maybe even for their content creators. Maybe you're bad at editing videos down into short clips or into short trailers. And usually publishers have dedicated teams to making these. They know how to release these, when to release these. So, you know, you need to be able to manage your own expectations of game development as well as manage the players' expectations. There are some amazing games that never get in front of the right audience, and they don't sell well, and they don't make the money back that it costs to make them. Watched 5 minutes of Outer Worlds and I didn't like it. Dialogue seemed really cringe. I kind of liked it. I didn't not enjoy playing it, but it was, yeah, it is what it is. I contacted an artist for the capsule today. Ooh, nice. Pay for the assets myself. Hold my beer. Yeah, good luck. Good luck. I mean, sometimes it can work. Sometimes people can make a game, they can get it in front of the right audience, it can go viral. But a lot of times, a lot of indie games, at best, are going to sell like 1,000 copies. And they might be pretty good. They might be really interesting, unique indie games, but if they don't have a market, you're not going to make money. And if they have a market, but you don't get the game in front of the market, you're not going to make money. So that's like, there's two things you have to think about. Does my game actually appeal to people? And can I get that game in front of the people that it appeals to? So that's where market analysis and competition analysis is so important. What is your game competing against, and where do most of those people that convert from watching like trailers, for instance, or screenshots come from? Is it from Facebook? Is it from Instagram? Is it from TikTok? Is it from Twitter? Is it from ads Maybe on TV, maybe the people that you're trying to reach out to are actually just watching TV, or they're on YouTube, for instance. So know where your market actually is and spending time. And I can't emphasize that enough. Know who your market is. If you don't, and if you don't know how big they are, you're essentially going into game development blind. Which is really fucking stupid.
Game they want.
Speaking of not able to do everything on your own, does anyone have a good place to come buy the rights to music and put it in a game? You can actually get a lot of free stuff from like Pixabay. If you want. If you just need something like really simple, you can use AI generated music if you're okay with that. Just know that a lot of players will not buy your game because it has AI generated music in it. Just keep that in mind. You can also probably buy cheap song rights for like $15, $20 a piece from some sites. You know, they'll give you commercial licenses for that.
So the advice I have is be very clear in your messaging.
Yes.
And in all your messaging. Be consistent and be clear. You're releasing a PR statement? Read it. Make sure it's saying exactly what you want and not implying things you're not giving.
Yes, and also just like, it's okay to hype, but hype based on reality. Don't hype up things that don't exist, that's just false advertising, right? No Man's Sky. But also don't hype things up that don't really have importance. I understand that you want to say that your universe has 2 trillion planets or whatever the fuck, Sean Murray. But I'm sorry, but when I visit 20 of those planets in your game, everything else will feel exactly the same. They're not special anymore. I don't really have an interest in it. Same with Starfield. It's like, okay, there's moons. They're cool to land on and look at. And that's it. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say, well, the moons exist so you can get certain resources and also just have a nice bit of a distraction from going to the main planets with life on it. It's okay to say that. Right? You put them in, they don't have a significant use, but they're used more in like the base building aspect, right? Where this moon is high in concentration of this resource, so it's good to send that back to your main hub on some planet and be able to build some resources from that. Just be honest with people, and I can't stress it enough, be honest and transparent.
When you do interviews with game journalists, make sure you say the same things that were said in your PR statement.
Sean
Don't
Murray.
promise things that you're not going to do.
Sean Murray.
Don't imply things thinking it makes the game sound better
Sean
that
Murray.
you know you're not going to deliver. And this is true whether you're doing a conference, whether you're, doing some online Q&A on Reddit.
Yep.
Everywhere you should give the same message. Basically, what I recommend to people is state what kind of game you're making, what the genre is, what the setting is, what kind of story you're telling. Talk about specifically about how many hours you expect people to get out of it and whether or not it's replayable. And then, this is really important, if you compare it to another game, say why you're doing the comparison.
Yes, don't just say it's like for Cauldron Chronicles, right? We say, oh, we're inspired by Genshin, right? But it's specifically what about Genshin? What, are we going to have gacha mechanics? No, we're not going to have gacha mechanics. But it's some of the world design and the stylization of Genshin, right? Or for the Atelier series, it's some of the ways that the gathering ingredients is handled. For Skyrim, it's specifically the alchemy that has inspired us the most with it, right? For Elden Ring, it's the way that we have landmarks that are visible in the distance. What is it specifically? Don't just say the game is a mix of Elden Ring, Skyrim, Genshin, and the Atelier series, because it's obviously not. It's a mix of those mechanics and some of the ways the art is handled, some of the way that the design is handled. You have to be honest about it. He's absolutely right, and that's a very understated aspect that he's right about. Genshin, will you have waifus? Maybe, I don't know. It's the climbing. There won't be climbing.
They're open world. Maybe they share similar settings.
Yes.
Maybe the humor style is the same. But be specific. Because if you just say, hey, we're a lot like Half-Life, people might expect an action shooter.
Or they might expect the world to be kind of dystopian, or, the physics to be, a lot of the game mechanics to be built around the physics of the game.
People might expect an 80-hour game. People might expect the game to be in source. So there's so many things that come when you make a comparison like that you want to be very, very specific on what your comparison is. Now, I said on the one hand. The other hand is this. people are still going to think what they want. You can say all you want, you can do all you want, you can show clips from the game. It's not going to change some people's minds. They're still going to think what they think about your game and then make a comparison between what you said you were going to give and what you gave to what they thought you were going to do.
That is very true. And that exists not just with players, but for game devs as well. When you write a design document, I always tell, junior designers, it's like, at best, when you first write a design document, at best, it's going to be 90% accurate and have 90% of the information that you want in there. Until you get it in front of other people's eyes, the programmers, the artists, it doesn't matter how skilled you are, you're going to miss something. They're going to find a discrepancy in some of the way that you're designing it. They may have a question that you thought was well explained, the answer was well explained in your document, but it wasn't. And he's very right. The same is true with players. You can do your best, but I still think it's like, at best, 90% of players maybe are going to have a perfect understanding of what that game is. You might have, from the other 10%, you might have 90% of that 10%. I know we're doing a lot of math here, right? Get your tinfoil hats on. 1 + 1 = 3. But you might have 90% of that 10% that is okay, and it's like, okay, I thought this would be a bit different, but I'm okay with it. Absolutely love it. 50 people. That is thanks to Evan MMO for the wonderful raid, and thank you again, Evan. Let's give a shout out to fucking Evan. Shout out to Evan MMO. Wait, will that work? Can I add him? Still in here. Go to bed. Go get some food. But yeah, huge shout out. Go give him a follow. Thank you so much again for the raid. So it's like, no matter what you do as a game designer or a producer, or if you're in charge of marketing the game, there will be people that don't understand, and some people just won't. There's like those few individuals that will never want to understand, or they will have it in their minds that the game is this way, and no matter what you say, I don't believe you. It was supposed to be this way because you said this and I interpreted it some way. It is what it is.
And if that comparison is lacking, they are going to go online and they're going to complain about it.
Yep.
Are they wrong? Yes. Did they not listen to you or any of the, dozens of interviews you did? Yes, that is true. But
they still have the right to do it.
And a lot of people listening to them don't care. They're just hearing someone go, "Oh no, this game isn't very good. It's not very long, or it doesn't have depth of perks, or something that you thought was really, really important that you had to have." Even though no one said it had that on the team, they expected it, and then when they didn't get it, they got upset.
Well, I think part of that too, especially because he's referencing Outer Worlds, right? When you say the game is an RPG, there is no doubt in my mind that people have specific expectations. And if I don't put any perks into Golden Chronicles, I think he was a programmer for Outer Worlds. I can't remember. But if I don't put perks into Golden Chronicles, I still think the game is an RPG. But people will expect there to be perks. I'm not saying there will or won't be perks, of course. But just that when I say that Golden Chronicles is an RPG, I have to be very specific why I call it that and what mechanics in the game I feel make it an RPG as opposed to just a narrative game, right? And it's specifically the choices that you have with potion outcomes and with consequences of talking to characters, getting them killed, sending them to a different part of the world, changing the fate of them or of a larger region of the world, that makes it a role-playing game. You are playing the role of an alchemist, and you have the ability to utilize your influence kind of indirectly through these other characters to change the world and change their fates. So, we have to be very specific about that. He's very right. Expectations are important to manage at all phases. And if, for instance, we change something throughout development, like, for instance, if I said, okay, we're going to have potion combat, and then we try it and it doesn't work, I have to go back and I have to make sure that I update those expectations to people and say, no, we tried potion combat, it didn't work for these reasons, so it won't be in the final game. And make sure that anywhere that I state it will be, or that I want it to be, is updated, and that I take the L, essentially, right? I say, you know what, hey, we thought it would work, it doesn't, we removed it, so yeah. Just know that when you're buying the game, it's not going to have this, so if you wanted that, I apologize, but it's not going to be in that game.
That is exactly the kind of expectations that you want to try to manage. However, all the management in the world isn't necessarily going to work. So you also have to accept, just like with discoverability, that some people who would love your game will never find it. You're going to accept that some people who you think are right in your target audience who learn about your game will think you're delivering something else, even though you didn't say you were delivering that. They're going to think it, and then they're going to be mad that they didn't get it. And this has happened on every game I've ever had. And I think you just have to find a way to manage that. Maybe you'll find a better way than I found to manage it. So my final words on this, when you're getting your game finished towards the end, really work hard on trying to manage the expectations of what game you're delivering to the consumer. Try to talk directly to players in your interviews and go, here's what we're giving you. Here's what we think it's like. Here's how long it'll be. Here's what you should expect. And hopefully most people will hear you. And there will be some people who can't, and you can never do anything about that. So I hope this helps.
That was very helpful. We're trying to do that now. One of the reasons we stream is to manage expectations as well, to show those early stages of development. But that way, people can go back and see our thoughts and issues in that moment if we do have to make a cut of a feature that we thought would be in the game, like potion combat, for instance. Or at least can keep up to date and say, okay, he hasn't given an interview in 2 months, so we don't know what's going on with the game. No, you can just check in with our streams, right? Or watch our VODs. And maybe we need to make some update videos of, hey, here was what happened with the last month of development. Here are some of the changes we made in the game. Short, bite-sized, at most 10-minute videos that we can throw on YouTube. Actually, I like that idea. I think a lot of people here might miss some of my videos and streams, which is okay. They're very long. They're very dry. Or they're controversial. I don't know. And I think it's cool if you can just kind of check up a 10-minute video at the end of every month and say, okay, he added water, new NPC stuff. Okay, cool. Short, maybe. I think I would rather make it into a longer video so that I can explain some things, right? Because a short is just not great for explanation or multiple things that happen in a 1 month period. Moist. Either way, that was a fantastic discussion with Tim Cain here. Thank you so much for watching that, and if you're on YouTube, thank you so much for watching that, and maybe we can do a few more of these. It's still pretty early. I did wake up at 6 a.m. today, so we'll see.